vision received was that of blood cells, traveling throughout the body, supplying the much-needed oxygen and other nutrients to the differing members of the body to fulfill their purpose. Once the blood cells are spent, they must return back to the heart to be refilled before being sent out again and fulfill their purpose. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Father's Heart podcast. It's been a while since I've done a live one, so I hope that this recording is actually better than the other quality recordings that you guys have had to suffer through, but hopefully the content in those recordings will make it well worth your time. But this particular podcast and the episodes that will follow, now that the holidays are over, that's kind of what it's about. And as I was gathering my thoughts to come up with content, I've wanted to share something that has actually been on my website. It's something that impacted me long ago when I heard it on an audio tape. It was an audio tape by Jack Deere. It was titled "Surprised by the Power of the Spirit." And in this tape, obviously Jack Deere is speaking, and he quotes a person named J.I. Packer. He says, "Over the years, I have observed that the majority of what, quote, Christians believe is not derived from their own patient and careful study of the scriptures. The majority of Christians believe what they believe because godly and respected teachers told them it was correct. All, quote, Christians are at once beneficiaries and victims of traditions. What we must do, rather, is acknowledge that we are full of tradition, good or bad, to a much greater extent than we realize. And we must learn to ask by the light of Scripture critical questions about what we have thus far taken for granted." Now, the first part of that was Jack Deere quoting J.I. Packer and what he said. And then the last part was what Jack surmised or concluded. And so I bring this particular series, I start this particular series with that thought in mind, because the scriptures tell us in Colossians 2:8 that we need to beware lest anyone cheat us through philosophy or empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. I told the Lord many years ago, and obviously one of my private conversations with him, that I wanted to know the truth. I didn't want to believe in something that was incorrect or in error and then pay the penalty for it. I would rather know the truth. I would rather be given the opportunity to accept it or reject it. I mean, just the thought of going to hell believing in a lie that led you there was just a horrible thought to me. I didn't want to be that person. Just give me the truth, Lord, and let me decide. I may not have fully realized many years ago, in the way and in the depth and with the appreciation that I have today, how profound that request of mine was. Because from the very beginning, the Garden of Eden, God has given man the power to choose for themselves. Life, to be in covenant with our Creator, or death, eternal separation from Him. So it's with these thoughts that I would like to talk about holidays. And I guess I should start with my wife and my eldest child concerning holidays. Now, they're both here, so you guys can kind of say hello.
Hello. Hello.
All right. That was my wife first and my daughter second. And I kind of had the idea that, I always want to make these podcasts relatable. I believe the scriptures are relatable in and of themselves if you have a heart to receive the word, but I think it's important to kind of bring it to a practical reality to some people. And so that's why we've had previous episodes where we gave our testimony of our family before we were married, and then also after we were married. And so I felt like this would be a good opportunity or time to do that again. So I guess I'll first ask my wife to kind of share her thoughts. I'm going to, after, they share their thoughts and speak, kind of share my kind of little testimony, my little journey in this idea of holidays, and why there's certain holidays that we as a family have participated in. And then there's others that we chose not to for various reasons. But I guess we'll start with Patricia. Patricia, you got married to me 23 plus years ago, and you already had certain thoughts, ideas, and convictions. And I'd just like you to kind of share your journey of how you came to celebrate some holidays and not celebrate other holidays.
So for me, had similar prayer or heart as you. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to study the Word. When I started in my faith, as I shared before, I came from a Catholic background, and I never really understood what it was to read the Bible. So I was on this systematic reading the Bible journey with a friend of mine, or some friends that were God was using in my life, and I was going through the books of the Old Testament. And when I got to Jeremiah, and I know this is a scripture that is used, but nobody ever talked to me about holidays, nobody talked to me about a lot of things. I was sort of, as I was reading the Word, I was discovering a lot. And I had also read books about, salvation and baptism, things like that. But I was reading Jeremiah, and I remember when I stumbled on the scripture, it's in Jeremiah 10, that as I was reading it, Jeremiah 10, 3 through 4, which, may I say the script, may I speak?
Absolutely.
So it says, "For the
Feel
customs
free.
of the people are vain, for one cutteth the tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold, and they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." So I read that, and I remember I thought, oh my gosh, that's the Christmas tree. That was my reaction. And I went to talk to my friends about it, and they didn't have that conviction, but nobody could deny what I had just read in the scriptures. So I sort of just kept seeking the Lord on it, because I'm the kind of person that when I run into something, I start digging around in the scriptures. I start trying to find the meanings of words, trying to find different places where that scripture may have been mentioned. And granted, this was early on, but I kind of stood alone on that, because I was in a fellowship where they did celebrate the holidays. I just I was alone at the time, so having a tree wasn't a big. I didn't have one, and then I wasn't interested in Christmas after I read that, and so.
How many years ago was it?
That was a long time ago. That was when I first started in the faith, so the late 80s, I want to say.
Okay.
You always want to put a time on me, and I don't remember times too well, but either late 80s, it had to be late 80s, because I moved to Florida in the 90s. And so then I moved to Florida, and I moved to a Spanish church, and mostly a lot of Puerto Ricans. And so around the time of Christmas, it's, my family's Dominican. Puerto Ricans are very festive people, very house to house. So I kind of got into what they call the aguinaldos, going house to house, singing, and all of that. But I still didn't do a tree. I still didn't decorate. I still kind of hung different than everybody else in terms of Christmas. And then during that time, somebody invited me to a Bible study, and I met a pastor that was actually, they had the same convictions in that Bible study. So I was like super excited, because I remember after going to that Bible study, the first Christmas Eve, I put that in quotes, I spent with them in a Bible study, where everyone else was having dinners and all that. I was having brownies and punch, and we were doing a Bible study. That stays in my mind, because it was exciting to me to be around like-minded thinking people about the holidays. And so I just continued walking in that, and I shared that with you, Jay, when we met. I believe we talked about different things, and that was one of the
There were many things that we talked about.
That was one of the things that we talked about. So
now I want to make sure that that every listener understands, this isn't solely about Christmas, but that's where you went towards.
That's where I went towards. I felt strongly about Halloween prior to that.
Okay.
Because I had been very early on, before I started studying the Bible, actually. I started slowly in the Bible, and somebody talked to me about a person named Rebecca Brown, who was a woman who had come out of witchcraft. And she was doing, I don't know if she was from Texas or Oklahoma, but she was very prevalent in the Christian circles because a lot of people were exploring spiritual warfare, walking in that, praying against demonic spirits. And I was very intrigued with that because I realized when I came to the faith that there were belief systems from my ancestors that were not pleasing to the Lord, and I didn't want to be a part of that. But I heard her talking about what the witches do on Halloween, and I was like, oh no, I am not having anything to do with that ever again. And so that one I walked away from super easy. I didn't even want to do Harvest Fest or none of that stuff because she was talking about how that night they actually prayed and sacrificed, young innocent animals and babies. And I was horrified and terrified, and so that was sort of one holiday that I ditched real quick that I didn't want to have.
Okay, so Halloween, that's usually the obvious one, even though there are many Christians that will, celebrate some form of it in a different way. But would you say, share with us, did you participate in the normal holidays, considering you were mostly raised in America? And you went on your summers to Dominican Republic, I would assume, like myself, being in American culture, we celebrated those American cultures.
I went trick-or-treating, and I did all the Halloween
Okay, so
stuff.
Halloween, Christmas,
horror houses, all that
Easter, stuff. Valentine's.
Yes. Oh yeah, that was another one. Valentine's Day. I was like, I struggled with that one. Some of it was my own personal reason, but I started looking into the origins of it, and it was like, why are people doing this? There's so many people that are miserable on this day anyway. Like, I was looking at it from a point of view of the people that don't get anything, because I was working in a law office at the time.
Oh, that's not surprising.
I was working in a law office at the time, and it was like so many people that like went over the top with this Valentine's Day, and so many people that were so sad on that day. And I didn't like that. So I started asking the Lord about that one too, because it was like, okay, I don't see this in the Bible. So Valentine's Day was another one. And then I don't think I had any strong feelings about Easter until I started hearing teachings on it later on. I didn't see the point with the eggs and the Easter egg hunt and all of that. But when I started seeing that it was tied to other religions, then I didn't want to have anything to do with that. But that one came like further along the way because, Easter people celebrate Resurrection Sunday, and there was a lot of plays and a lot of performances that were done in the Christian churches in Texas that I was in that really hyped that up.
Right.
Where the focus was the resurrection of Jesus. So that one came off, shaved off down the road.
Okay, so some were immediate Halloween, some were more progressive over time.
Right.
Okay. So I guess that's, my wife's perspective. And, what experiences that led her to start being more discriminating of holidays. She shared those with me. We didn't share that in our testimony, but yeah, that was one of the things that we talked about early before we even got married, and got to know some of her stances and her beliefs. So that, for me, I celebrated, being in the American culture, all of those holidays. Halloween, I remember going trick-or-treating. Christmas, we had a Christmas tree. We did the lights. There was presents. Easter. Valentine's, I remember Valentine's just doing it in school and kind of being shy because some girl gave me a Valentine's Day and I didn't know how to take that, and that was kind of weird and awkward for me because I was never a ladies' man in my youth and never a ladies' man afterward. I didn't have that type of chip on my shoulder. So it was all very, I guess, kind of weird, but there was candy, just stick candy in there and the kids are going to be all for it. So that's why Halloween is such a big thing for the kids. But my daughter, my eldest daughter, is here because I wanted her to be able to share her perspective, being that she was a child who was traumatized at the fact that her parents didn't celebrate those major holidays that we've just mentioned. So, what would you like to share, considering you are the eldest in this family and you really didn't participate in those major holidays that we just mentioned?
I don't know if I would say I was traumatized, first of all.
Okay.
I don't think I ever was. I would say jealous sometimes
Ooh.
of the children growing up, like getting presents twice a year because of birthday and Christmas. I would say I was pretty jealous of that.
Oh, so you
for a
felt
time.
left out because you only
Yeah.
got to do your birthday?
Yeah, the jealousy was never stemming of Jesus. It was the fact that they got presents and I didn't. But I guess there was a situation in Florida. I don't remember this, but it's a secondhand story from you guys actually, where there were some friends of the family taking us somewhere or with us and had mentioned something about Christmas. And apparently my brother and I, one of us, said something along the lines, "Oh, we don't do that. It's not Jesus' birthday." I don't know what we said. I just know from, I think my mom told me this, they went with questions to you guys. And that circled round back to the church leadership.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about friends.
No. This is when I was really young. So I guess we were taught at a very young age it wasn't Jesus' birthday, simply put.
Right. Very simple.
But that situation, I don't know who blabbed, me or my brother, but
it was you.
It was me?
Yeah,
okay.
it was you.
I got in trouble a lot for saying things contrary to some of the church principles there, but that was one of those things. It was a church in which they celebrated Christmas, and you can say better than me, what did that result in, Mom, with that situation? What ended up happening?
Well,
then it was one of the children had a conversation with me present, and was kind of saying that it was Jesus' birthday, and I was the one that blotted out, "No, that's not in the Bible." Or she said something like, "It's in the Bible."
Oh, so the two of you teamed up on that innocent little
Sure.
girl?
I don't remember any
She
of
was
this.
she was actually older than Lydia, but she was a pastor's daughter, so the little girl went running to her
Uh-oh.
dad, and
The
we were
pastor's
just
daughter.
like, "Uh-oh." And then after that, the kids had been riding in the car with some friends who are very dear friends that we have now, and they actually don't, I believe they re-examined the whole holiday thing over time. But they were very nice. They were just asking us questions. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what did my kids say to them? But they were speaking the truth. They were speaking the truth that we had taught them. At the time, I was always afraid of conflict and the waves that would ensue. So anyway, they just had questions, and then it became a deal in the church because now it's more people that know. And yeah, it was more like a big, we had a message in church that seemed directed at those people that don't.
Yeah, that's
celebrate
happened
the
to us a
holidays.
couple times in different churches where we have a stance and a belief, and we don't go out and try to cause a ruckus, but we're also, I guess, I'm also not the type of family that beats around the bush, if you will. And if something comes at me as if it's the truth and I know it's a lie, I usually don't placate them. And so as a father, I probably was pretty proud of my daughter for saying something out, and not, just going along, because otherwise, what's that going to do to them? They're gonna, conform because, everybody else is believing, but she didn't do that. And so I probably was pretty proud that, she said the truth. And she wasn't trying to cause division, but she wasn't about to take in some lie just because, an older, not really a friend, but kind of an acquaintance, was in the church. But, that happened to us at another church where I was asking questions about, I guess, the identity of Jesus and his relationship, if you will, with the Spirit of God and oneness. And then all of a sudden we get the Trinitarian teaching the next Sunday or the next Bible study Wednesday or something. And so those things, happened, often at times. But so I guess this is my Q&A session. Let's go back to Lydia. You were homeschooled
Yes.
till 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably didn't have to, I guess, get affected on a more at a higher degree, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
because you were homeschooled, and that's sort of like a bubble. It's sort of like a shelter, Whereas if you were in public school all that time, by golly, every year you would have had to deal with it because everybody in school is doing Halloween and dressing up to come to school and dressing up for, or not dressing up, but, doing stuff for Christmas and doing stuff for Valentine's and doing stuff for all the holidays. You eventually did go to public school, and eventually they did do some of that stuff. So did you run into any conflicts or situations? What was your experience as you had to kind of live out something that you were just simply raised in by your parents?
I don't remember particular instance that stands out in mind. I know I did have to address it with some people, just like random questions, and I kind of would give the kind of easy answer, like it's not historically, you can find out that it wasn't actually Jesus's birthday. It wasn't very likely it happened in that time. I didn't really go into the religious reasons too much.
Mm-hmm.
Behind it, because I didn't really talk about that too often in school. But my friends were aware I didn't celebrate Christmas. Sometimes I got presents and I was like, I hope you know I can't return the favor. I can't get you a present back. And they didn't seem to mind. Same thing with Halloween. I didn't go trick-or-treating or anything like that, but people would give me leftover candy. Valentine's Day, it was at school, you would write a little note, and it didn't have to be to someone you liked. It could be a note of appreciation or something, and they kind of just sent it off. Same thing around Christmas time. It would be a little note with a candy cane. So it was around. I would say the jealousy had kind of dissipated a lot by that time. And I had an understanding. I didn't really utilize it actually, though, till college. I remember a lot more conversations revolving around my reasons for not celebrating the holidays in college with roommates, with my friends, especially those who professed to be Christian or some form of Christianity were also kind of confused. You don't celebrate Easter? You don't celebrate Christmas? Most people understood Halloween, but
didn't they immediately label you as a certain religion?
what was that? I don't remember that.
Well, normally, I could be presumptuous in that statement, but normally when you say you don't celebrate the holidays, they immediately say, "Oh, you're a Jehovah's Witness."
Yes. Okay.
Did you get
yes,
that?
I did get
Oh,
that.
you did?
Or
Okay.
Jewish.
Or
I
Jewish. Okay.
I got asked if I was Jehovah's Witness or Jewish.
Yeah, I guess you look Jewish. Yeah,
I suppose.
biblically
yeah.
speaking.
And luckily, even though it was really rusty at that time, as one of our homeschooling things, Bible study and Bible topics were a part of our curriculum, so to speak. And we had to do a research project when I was around 9 years old on the holidays, and we had to write our own little papers on it.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I wrote papers. My sister was too young to do that, but she did learn with us, like the basics. So I remember we had to watch various documentaries on History Channel about it. We also had to look up Bible verses. So my mom mentioned Jeremiah 10. That was a big one that we looked at in our research about Christmas. With Easter, we had to go look up. That's funny. I study linguistics now and like how languages develop, but we kind of did that in that paper on the origins of certain words. Like, why is Easter mentioned one time in the Bible when it should have been actually Passover, things like that.
You studied that in your linguistics class?
Not in particular, but in terms of studying the origins of words and where they came from.
Okay.
I kind of do that now, so it's kind of funny how that tied together. But yeah, doing that research, even though it was preliminary, obviously. It's a 9-year-old, and now I'm a graduate student. But in college, I was able to pull on that using my dad's website because he keeps that stuff. And I was actually able to use the more adult material in that it's a lot more.
You guys got to stop referring to me in the third person. I'm right here in front of you. This is a part of our, I know we're getting used to the podcast,
But regardless, your website, I was able to pull a lot of resources there. And I was able to back up a lot of my... Christmas was relatively easy, actually, for me to back up with the word.
Really?
Just because of Jeremiah, I would walk people through that. But I would also talk about the Lord. There are certain verses, can't remember them all, but I know Deuteronomy 6:4 was one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God.
The Shema.
Yes, and how you're supposed to not worship other gods before him, according to the Ten Commandments, and how there are various verses in the Bible. I have them in those, in that research. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. But bewailing the Israelites or followers of Christ to be led astray by pagan ways, etc. So I would use those, but also historic. I really like those projects in that we incorporate both the Bible but also history with it. So if people didn't get the biblical reason, they could usually understand the historical reason with me. So like with Christmas, I would say reasonably people would admit Jesus' birthday was probably not around that time. In fact, I've met people who are Christians say, yeah, we know, but also it's just a day we take to commemorate it.
Always
or
that
people,
but.
Huh?
Always that but.
Yeah, or I've gotten, people who aren't really Christians, they're kind of like, well, it wasn't really about him in the first place. It was about Santa Claus. I'm like, but Santa Claus has historical stuff too. So things like that. It's just funny to hear, I guess, or ironic for me to hear the different ways of justifying it in a way. Halloween, another one was, I met quite a few Christians, not necessarily friends, but peers in high school, college age, who admitted that they grew up like doing trunk or treat. And I'm like, what's that? Because we didn't do that at my church. But I heard about it later on when I was older. And
that was when we moved it to Georgia, right? Because that didn't happen in Miami.
Yeah, that was not in Florida. And I heard about it, and then it was described. I'm like, that's trick-or-treating in church. So I was like, well, that's just kind of reframing it. And then in research and in explaining to others, you just kind of realize how people take something. It's not, you could argue, it's not so bad or something like that, but you're taking something secular that is not of the Lord, simply put, and you're trying to reframe it and fit it under the Christian framework, which is warned against in the Bible. So for me, in explaining to others, that kind of solidified my own beliefs and why I won't. It's challenged me on, will I stand on this when I'm not at home? So, for example, if I'm invited to a Christmas event and it's explicitly said it's a Christmas thing, it's not a winter party, it's Christmas, I have not gone to those things. Or even if it's a winter thing and it's like ugly sweater themed, or they do a Secret Santa exchange, I'm like, I'm not going to participate.
You're bowing out.
I tell people why, and they're usually pretty understanding. It's not caused a full-blown issue with people. The only times where people get really confused, I would say, is the ones who are Christians and celebrate Christmas. That was the main problem. And Easter as well, trying to explain that to people.
So you had more issues with Christians that celebrate Christmas rather than non-Christians who celebrate Christmas?
Yeah, I would say they didn't get it, but they also were just like, they didn't really care about the Christian component too much anyway. I do know some people who, like, traditionally they'll go to church on Christmas and on Easter, but they don't really go to church throughout the year.
Right.
It's just kind of a thing you do, a tradition, if you will. And so that's kind of how that went down in my college and graduate student years.
Well, you got into something that I was going to get into, but you already got into it, which is fine. There was a little monkey wrench in my plans, but it's no big deal.
I'm not in your head, sorry.
No. That's fine. Even though my ancestry was from Puerto Rico, in America, I grew up like all American kids, and I consider myself more American than I do Puerto Rican, and you know that. But for the sake of those that are listening, so growing up in the American culture, participated, when I was in my youth. We participated in obviously New Year's Day and Mother's Day and Father's Day and Valentine's Day and April Fool's Day and Easter and all of the other ones that we've mentioned. But when we moved up to Georgia, we had already decided, because my wife and I had spoke, before we got married, about holidays and things that we would engage in and then not engage in, and realize, counting the cost, what's that going to cost us? Is it going to cost us friends? Is it going to cost us relationships with other people? Because, they're very tied to those things. But I remember it was in 2008, I believe, when you were 9 years old, that I decided, because I had never studied it before on my own. I never studied, holidays and their origins. But I felt like we're homeschooling. So as the headmaster of Our Father's Heart Homeschooling, I decided we're going to research this and we're going to make this a family affair. I don't think Mom was involved. I think I took you three to the library, the local library ourselves. Do you remember that?
Yes. I think we had to.
We went to that's where we started. Yeah. We went there. We went through encyclopedias. We found books. We went and then we found out a lot of stuff was on the internet already. It was already on history.com, which I can't even find that stuff now on history.com. They've changed it. They've modified it, and what we found there is not there anymore. But one of the things I did was I copy pasted the things that we did find in history.com, and I put it in a document. But for me, that was actually the first time, because I had heard other people talk about it, and they were, pretty dogmatic about it, if you will, with the holidays and not participating in some things. And I guess to some extent there are some holidays that I'm dogmatic about, like Halloween. I'm just not doing that, because it's just overtly obvious why a Christian should not. But even sometimes you can't even explain that. So that in 2008, and it was near the end of the year, it was probably near Halloween or Christmas, that we just went to the library and we started researching and just gathering information. And we used that. I was more on the research side, I think I remember. And then my wife, because she was very good at the writing technical aspect of that, she would help you guys out with writing your papers, because that was the assignment. Guys had to come out with a paper. Maybe not a 5-paragraph essay like you did in high school, but something like it, where you had, we were trying to teach you the outline and the format of how to write a paper. So your first paragraph was, what's your thesis? What's your thing? And then the body, and what are the different, facts that you researched and found? And then what's your conclusion at the end? So it was really easy to do, but we found so much information that I just simply wasn't aware of. Obviously Halloween, we found out a lot of stuff on Christmas. We found out stuff on Easter. And it was really easy to find. I mean, it was just right there in the encyclopedia. Most of our stuff really came from just get an encyclopedia. I don't know about today. I don't know about today's encyclopedias. Haven't been in one, but the ones that we used were from what I can remember, 1990, 2008, 1989, let's see here, 2005. So definitely late 20th century, early 21st century, we found, what we needed. And that was when I became personally fully persuaded on why I'm not going to be engaging in Christmas, specifically Christmas or Easter or any of these other things. And even though we raised you that way, I hadn't studied it. I hadn't really looked into it. I guess it was an issue to me for several reasons. Yes, I was raised and experienced those things as a child. But partaking in them was not such a nostalgic grip on my life that I wanted and I had to continue in them. And then on top of that, when my mom died when I was 20 years old, our relationship was strained, and I was kind of somewhat separating and sort of just becoming more independent at an early age, maybe sophomore, junior year of high school. And so even though I remember having a Christmas tree at the time, now I remember, now that I'm thinking about this, I remember when she was married to her fourth husband and my sister was around, I remember they were decorating Christmas. And this hurt because they had a stocking for 3 stockings.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't involved in it. And I remember that, and I remember, and it's not, it didn't affect me so much that, oh, that's why I don't celebrate Christmas. I can honestly say that really isn't why, but I just remember that event, and that happened so near to her passing away. It was just memorable to me. So, after she died, well, I was alone. I was living in a house alone, and I went through she actually died, I think it was December. I think it was December 29th. It was just right after Christmas. She had a heart attack and she died. And so Christmas was actually sour that year. And that was in, I can't even remember the year now. 1994. There it is. I'm thinking of where I was in school. I was trying to go, where was I in school? Oh, yeah, that was my second year of college. So 1994, she passed away. 95, I was alone. Christmas was nothing for me. 96, Christmas was nothing for me. I was still alone. 97, I didn't meet you until 97. But that church, that if you go back and listen into the other podcast of our testimony, that particular church where my wife and I met, that was a church that didn't celebrate Christmas because the pastor there was very against the Catholic Church. Until I researched it on my own, I didn't realize why the Catholic Church was such an issue with him in regards to Christmas. His Catholic Church was an issue for many other things. But I didn't realize what was the impact of the Catholic Church on the Christmas holiday. I didn't realize it until I researched it. And I realized, wow, that has to do with the 4th century, the Council of Nicaea, the Council of, I think it was Constantinople. And I realized, oh, that actually has to do with a lot of things that are are famous now in regards to doctrine, which I'm really more interested in than origins of holidays. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I just had a deeper appreciation after we did that study. And that was just with you guys. You were 8 or 9.
9.
John was 7 or 8. And Deborah was lagging behind about 4 years from you. So you can do the math for that. So yeah, she was young. She was just tagging along, not really understanding everything, but things were being seeded. But there are holidays that we still do partake of. Thanksgiving. We do birthdays. And my idea about Thanksgiving, and well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but our idea about Thanksgiving was just, man, it really is a day to just give thanks to the Lord for all that he's done this past year, for where we're at now, it was really just Thanksgiving. I mean, yes, we traditionally had a turkey. That's part of the American culture. And that's what I was raised in. But we didn't make the holiday an idol or a sacred golden cow that if you touched it, you're going to get our ire. You're going to get, you're going to get our wrath or anything. We didn't make any holiday that way. We celebrated birthdays, but only, and I talked about this with you, I think about 2 weeks ago as I was thinking about this. When we celebrated birthdays, we were always thanking God that he brought your life into our life.
Written on every card.
Literally written on every card. And I'm glad you can testify to that, because that was always our emphasis. It wasn't about, giving you a birthday and giving you presents. No, it was about really thanking you because, if you listen to the other testimonies, our podcast testimonies, that was a prophetic fulfillment in Mom's life. Not so much mine, like hers in comparison to hers. But I was just grateful to, after everything I've been through in my life, to actually have a family, to have a godly family, to have a family that was raised in a God-fearing way, in a God-fearing home. So that's kind of where I might want to end this particular session, because the next sessions for our podcast, I'm just going to share with everyone, and it's just for your consideration, for your edification, for your discernment, to consider what we researched. I literally have not all the documents that we use, although we do have some encyclopedias in our basement that actually have the information that we put in our notes, but I have the notes that we took in 2008 and 2009, and I'm just going to share, this is what we found. Maybe you haven't done that before. Maybe you never considered doing that. It's a total waste of time to you. But I think there's definitely a spiritual component that needs to be considered in regards to making a decision about, is this a holiday that I should even be partaking in? Obviously, Halloween is the most overt one. But when you look at the other ones, there's something very deceptive, insidious, because of the way that it's dressed. And the scriptures even kind of speak about that. So I'm going to end our session here at that point and let you guys go so that everyone else can kind of just consider our thoughts on the matter. And then our next podcast, we will look into the history and the origins of the major holidays that we've kind of spoken about. So hopefully that was a blessing to you just to hear from us, and we'll hear back from you or see you again, or I guess you guys will listen to us again on our next podcast. God bless. Thus is the ministry of our Father's heart through us. Our utmost desire is to be in the Father's heart, to know the Father's heart, and express the Father's heart to you. If you appreciate listening to this podcast and were blessed, pass it along to someone else by text, email, or word of mouth in the hopes that they might be positively impacted as you were. If you are interested in supporting our efforts, we would ask you to consider the following. 1, pray for us. 2, leave a positive rating or review with whomever you listen to our podcast with. And 3, if you desire to contribute monetarily, you can do so at paypal.me/JBenJesus or Cash App $JBenJesus or Venmo JBenJesus. That's JBenJesus. God bless.